This is the story of Cranley House. Cranley House is a big house situated in the centre of Combe Martin, opposite a very well-known pub called the Pack of Cards, which looks like a house of cards and apparently was built by somebody who made a lot of money gambling, and they decided to build a house on 4 floors and with the association of a pack of cards. Opposite, or nearly opposite, the Pack of Cards pub is a house called Cranleigh House, which apparently was built also by the same person who had such success in gambling. I happen to live in this house, and it has a very interesting story, and that is the story that I will be telling. I must say that I do feel rather inadequate to tell this story, but at the same time, I believe that we all have a destiny in life, and part of my destiny apparently is with this house and the journey that I have with it. I see it as like a ship in a way, which I'm travelling in to a certain destination. I'm not sure where, but it's definitely a one which has some exciting adventures along the way. I mean, I do know where I would like to go. I personally would like to, I am on a path to spiritual enlightenment, which sounds like a big story and a big path, which it also is. And what will happen in this, this is the first of several little videos that I'll be making, or some of them might be longer, and many different characters will come into this story, and it will range from the prosaic, from the very everyday, taking out the bins, to the highly spiritual. And I happen to be very fortunate to be living in a house which is associated with such great masters as the Master Jesus, who we can see here. He is one of my favourite masters, my favourite characters in the whole of literature and history and spirituality. He motivates me. If I feel down, I think of Jesus, I feel better. And it's as a result of Jesus's influence that I know about this house. So on the 3rd of on the 3rd of February in 1960, a lady called Mary King was given a directive by the Master Jesus to buy this house and to set it up as the Magdala Center, a healing center, and that's what she called it. Now, this house, at least in known memory, has been bought at auction derelict a couple of times. It's a big house, it's over 4 floors, and as you can imagine, you can't get a short ladder up onto the roof, so I guess a couple of points probably people didn't have the money to get the scaffolding up, and it fell into rack and ruin. And on one of those occasions, Mary King bought the house, but she was lucky enough to have a couple of benefactors and friends who were able to set the house up as a healing centre. And this is what she produced. That's the front cover from the booklet, the Magdala Center, and you can see it's Cranley House, High Street, Combe Martin. That's the address. And she ran healing services every day at 9 o'clock in the sanctuary, which was dedicated to the Master Jesus, and it's at the top of the house. This is a beautiful attic space with lovely A-frame beams, and I'll show you that in future videos. But as this is an introductory, I'm just giving some of the characters and just setting the scene. I knew about this house because of a friend of mine called John Stevenson, and he and his friend Gwyneth Evans Wilcock, wrote a series of articles for the Illustrious Society newsletter back in 2006 and 2007, and this was one of the articles. And I'm sure you can still get this edition. It's a back issue. I'm not quite sure which one it is. I should have to look up. But the title of the article is The Magdala Center, and it's on the page 6, and it's entitled Looking Back. And it's written by John Stevenson, who recounts the history of a remarkable centre opened on the instructions of the Master Jesus. So we're not talking about small characters here, although I do feel like a small character. I'm like the Frodo in this story, and sometimes I'd rather be back in the Shire, but sometimes I'm climbing the face of Mount Doom, and it sort of goes between one and the other, sometimes all in a day. And you have to keep a sense of humour with these kind of stories. What John Stevenson alerted me to was that there was this building, which I did know about before, which was in the centre of Combe Martin High Street, and it had this awesome history. And as I'm a person who loves stories, and particularly exciting stories which involve people like the Master Jesus, I was very interested in this series of articles. And when we came down for a pilgrimage, I think it was in July 2007, I'm not very good at remembering dates all the time, we always come down for a pilgrimage every year to Holston Down, which is another massive part of this story, which is a holy mountain, and I'll come back to that later, which is situated on Exmoor, just above the village of Combe Martin. It's a beautiful place, and every year on the 23rd of July, pilgrims gather there for a pilgrimage. Often the pilgrimage to get there, people come by car from London. When you get there, you can actually park at the bottom of the mountain, and it's only about 5 to 10 minutes walk for an able-bodied person to get to the top. So it's not a difficult place to make a pilgrimage to. You could walk from the village, and it takes me about 2.5 hours, but it takes my neighbour, who's a very fast walker, about 1.5 hours. So it depends what kind of pilgrimage you want to do. Anyway, we were down here for that pilgrimage, as usual, and I had it in my mind that I would like to visit Cranley House, with the idea possibly of buying it. That was my thought, which came into my mind, which I was impressed with, because I wanted to move out of London, and I wanted to find a new place to live with some spiritual meaning. And it struck me that living in Cranleigh House, which had this spiritual significance, and which was only 15 minutes drive from Holston Down, where I could go and pray and do pilgrimages, was a better place to start than any other. So I spoke to my friend John Stevenson, who was on the pilgrimage, and we spent 2.5 hours praying on the top of Holston Down, which we usually do, and we'll come back to that as well. And he gave me the telephone number of John Bennett, who was the then owner of Cranley House, and had been the owner of Cranley House for about 20 years, a very long time, even longer maybe, since the 80s. And I gave him a call, and he was in, and we arranged to go round to see the house the following day at midday, I think it was, on this Sunday. It would have been close to the closest Sunday to the 23rd of July in 2007. So we knocked at the door, and it's a big, quite impressive 1860 wooden door, larger than your average front door, and it felt like opening up to a new world. And we came with some friends of ours. One of our friends is a lady called Philomene Prempe, and I think Bipin and Livia Patel were also there, and my friend Stuart Johnston, who was down there for the pilgrimage as well. And we looked about. We came into the sitting room, and we went upstairs, and we thought about Mary King, who was the mother of our main yogi master, who is called George King. And he's an awesome character as well, and I'll tell you more about him, but I will he's the main character in the story, really. This is George King here. It's an old picture of him dressed up for his one of his many missions on the sea or on lakes. And we felt this excuse me, we felt this very positive energy permeating the whole house. It was very tangible, and the house faces southwest. It's above the river, facing the Pack of Cards pub. It's just as the hill slopes up at the back, behind the house, and it felt warm and dry and cozy, which was quite unusual for such a large house, but it was obviously the summer months. And as I looked round, I thought this would be a perfect house to create a bed and breakfast. And it's got everything we would need. It's got 5 bedrooms, so one for us and several bedrooms if we wanted to use them for bed and breakfast, or just for visitors of family and friends. And up at the top was the attic, which had been Mary King's sanctuary, which hadn't been used, it looked, since the 1970s. Certainly John Bennett had never used the attic for anything but storage, and it needed a lot of work doing on it, but I thought it had the perfect potential to do small yoga classes of about 6 to 9 people, as long as you place the tall ones in the middle. And we continued to look about, and what came into my mind is, I do need to buy this house. This is perfect for the next part of my journey. And at some point came into my head a message: custodian of the sanctuary. Custodian of the sanctuary. Now, that message hit me. It's not the kind of words that I would use. It didn't seem to come from me. It's what I call a message in my head. And I do sometimes get those short messages. Some people call them downloads, or it's like a strong impression. And I took notice of it. I didn't say anything, I don't think, at that point to anybody, but in my mind, I already felt that this house was part of a mission. Dolores Cannon talks about the 3 waves of volunteers who come to this earth, and we have missions to complete. And she also talks about how often people go off their mission, or they come with a big mission, but they can't complete it, because when they actually get to Earth and start living here, they find that it's a bit more than they bargained for. There's so many distractions. They have to make a living. There's bills to pay. There's all sorts of responsibilities just living on this planet to make some headway. And I sense that I probably am one of those. I think we all are, actually. I don't think there's any distinction between any of us. I just think that some people have probably got so distracted they can't remember why they came or why they were born at all. And it takes quite a lot of uncovering and discovering to get to the place where we might be able to do what we thought we were going to do in the first place. And I can sometimes feel like that every week or every day, that I'm not on track. I'm doing all sorts of interesting and exciting things sometimes, and sometimes all sorts of boring things, but they're not actually what they're not what I call at the top of my pyramid, which seems to me the most important and key things that I want to do. These videos being one of them, and a book being another one. But yeah, hopefully I'll get some help to do that. So I thought custodian of the sanctuary. Okay, I can do that one. And we came away from the house, and then we were all meeting for dinner at a place called the Sandy Cove Hotel, which is an amazing place to visit. It's just above Combe Martin, off the road to Ilfracombe, and it's a beautiful site with an amazing view. And there were several of us meeting for dinner there, and I think I told John about the impression that I had of this message that had come into my head, and he actually was very much getting a strong message that I was going to buy Cranley House from one of his guides. And he's a very spiritually minded man, John, and I will also put some videos of him talking on so that you can hear his side of the story. And there were events and thoughts stacking up which made it look like this was something that could happen if I chose to step into that role. So Stuart and I were camping, and we went to stay with a friend of ours who lived near Hartland, also in North Devon. And during that day, lots of ideas came into my mind, and I didn't say anything to Stuart about buying the house, because I wanted to have a clear picture first of what that might look like, and also practical things. I had a house in London which I could sell, which could probably cover the price of the house, and factors were there to make it possible for me to buy Cranley House. So I didn't say anything, but then I did I think in the evening, and I said to Stuart that I wanted to go back and look at the house again. So I think we did, but I actually can't remember now, but I've got a feeling that we did, because after that we were going back to London and we would have lost the opportunity. And intriguingly, the price had just been dropped from 335 to 325, and I managed to put, that's 100,000, and I managed to put my house on the market in London for 345,000. And Stuart worked tremendously hard. He's very, very good at doing all sorts of practical jobs, decorating and painting the front door and sprucing the whole place up. And if we had bought the house for 325,000, that was more within our reach, and then we would have the extra money left over to create a yoga room up at the top in what Mary King called the sanctuary, to teach yoga and also to dedicate it to spiritual practices, which is what it had been dedicated to in the 1960s when Mary King owned the place. So I'm going to finish there. And thank you very much for listening this far. And this story is to be continued. Thank you.